So that's 2014, and again, about 400, and 2015 is just going to continue to grow. Right? So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at some of these, some of the more interesting ones, because they're so popular. Multiple companies applied to run them. And so .app, .web, .tech, .music have multiple companies like Google and Amazon and other folks who say, we will run .app. And so what they do is they go to an auction, and whoever is willing to pay the most money gets to run it. So Google just paid $25 million to run .app. Another company paid almost $20 million to run .law. And so this is just an upfront investment just to get the right to run the top level domain. And obviously that affects the feasibility and the viability of the business, because now they have to make sure they make back that investment in order to be a profitable business. Any questions on that?
The money is paid to ICANN, right?
I'm sorry?
ICANN earns the income.
How does ICANN make the money?
No, they make the money. The money is paid to ICANN.
So there's an application fee. Every one of these new TLDs paid an application fee of $185,000 up front just to go through the evaluation process. Once they're approved, they then have to pay a minimum of $25,000 to ICANN. And that covers maybe the first 50,000 names. And as they grow in volume, they pay a variable fee. So it increases with it's like a tax on every name, 25 cents a name or 20 cents a name. So they have a lot of money in the bank right now because they collected $185,000 for almost 1,700 applications or something. So it's $360 million or something in the bank for ICANN. A lot of that was put aside, like a third of that was put aside for potential lawsuits. Right? So if the NG CCTLD wants to sue over .ing, you want to take Google to court, you'll probably take ICANN to court too. And so they have a huge legal defense fund. And they'll never run out of money. And so the idea is don't think about suing ICANN because they can outspend you for the next 10 years. That's part of their legal strategy.
It's obvious that it's growing, and I can see that there's a lot of categorization here. It seems like every single type or business or anything is becoming available in this space. Is this some sort of like control or something that it's quite hard to remember everything? Like there's so many of these domain names now.
Well, I mean, it's certainly a question about whether or not domain names will still be relevant 10 years from now. If you go to some countries like Japan, they don't use domain names; they have search engines. And even in the U.S., my kids, they don't type in Google.com in their browser. They go to a search engine and they type in Google.com or Facebook.com.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of navigation makes domain names irrelevant, right? But the best analogy we have is what happened with television channels. If you remember when you were growing up 30 years ago, in the U.S. anyway, we only had 3 or 4 channels to choose from. We had ABC, CBS, and NBC. Those are the 3 main U.S. channels, and then maybe a public access. Today, you have hundreds of channels, all appealing to very vertical special interests. You have a cooking channel, a hunting channel, right? You have a skiing channel. And those are all successful businesses because they target that niche, right? They're all special interests. So the same thing's happening now with domain names. There used to be just .com.org and a few others. Now there's .rodeo, .horse, .tattoo. And they can be profitable just for people who care about horses, right? Or cars, or cooking, or kitchens, right? Plumbing. So they definitely can be profitable by focusing in on that niche, right? I happen to be the reseller for .realtor. It's only available if you're a member of an association called the National Association of Realtors. It's the only ones that can get it. But they have 1 million members. it's going to be a very successful TLD. But that's the only people that can get it, right? So it's very narrow. There'll be some innovation. The whole idea of expanding this space is not only choice, but also innovation. So .bank, for example, which I'm very active in, we'll talk about that later, they're trying to introduce new security requirements so that they can have safe and secure online banking for online users. So it's trying to differentiate themselves from .com, where you might have a lot of malware and phishing and that sort of stuff. So a lot of these will be successful, a lot of them won't. Most of them probably won't be. And so we're going to talk a lot about the business aspects of running a registry and how they need to market themselves. You'll hear a lot of talk about positioning, how they differ from .com, how are they better than .com. And if they're not better or different, they probably won't succeed. Anything else? All right. So what I want to do, we're going to do one more. I'm going to fly through a policy update for you. You heard a lot about policy. I want to go through and tell you what policies are being worked on now within ICANN. And most of it's in the context of this expansion of the namespace. And so I think you'll start to see why people are concerned about some of the changes that are happening there. So this was given just 2 months ago, as before every ICANN meeting. They do have an online webinar, so if you want to be updated on what the current status of certain policies, you can watch the webinar. ICANN obviously is the opportunity where at these meetings, everyone comes together face to face to discuss the policies as well. So I'm on a working group, as I mentioned earlier, called Policies Implementation. We have weekly teleconference calls where we're coming up with our policies on how things transition from policy to implementation, and then we meet face to face during the ICANN meeting. So this is just a high-level schedule of the ICANN meeting that just happened in Singapore. This is just a summary of all the different meetings that are happening during the Singapore meeting about policies. I'm not going to spend too much time on any one of these. Refer about some of this stuff. So one of the big policy areas that are being worked on right now is what's called the IATA transition, right? As we said earlier, the internet started with the U.S. government. They still pretty much control the root zone file and how updates get made to that. As the internet has become global, a lot of governments are not happy with the fact that the U.S. government has so much control over this root zone file. So they want to try to transition control of that root zone file to a more international type of global body. So there's been a bunch of working groups formed to manage that sort of transition. So that's called the CWG. So again, we talked about this earlier. The part of the U.S. government, which is the Department of Commerce, has another sub-agency called the NTIA, and they're the folks within the government that manage updates to the zone file. And they're trying to give up that role and transition it to another group. So that's what a lot of people that ICANN are wrestling with now, is how to do that transition. There is a date, quasi-date of September of this year for the transition. It's not going to happen. I think we're several years away, frankly, in my view, before anything really happens in terms of this transition. But it's getting very controversial, clearly. Back in the U.S., we have politicians trying to pass laws saying this will never happen. Not only we'll never see this happen, we're not going to give up control. We have the CCTLDs are getting active now because they're trying to include some policies that impact CCTLDs. For example, should there be an appeal mechanism for redelegation? Are they making that question part of this transition as well, because it's part of IATA? So there's a lot of activity going on with the transition. Here's the current status. the typical PDP or policy development process such as this takes 3 to 4 to 5 years. So if you miss one update in February, wait 3 or 4 months to get another update, and it'll look like not much happened. It's really, really slow. Who is, I think, has gone on for 12 years. Got an update Who is.
And every time every time you do one Who is project, they start another one.
That's right.
And
So part of this, it gets really complicated. We're talking about transition. At the same time, they're trying to talk about accountability and transparency, which you'll hear a lot within the ICANN circle. Because right now, the U.S. government is kind of the only body out there that makes sure ICANN is accountable. Right? If someone isn't happy with it, but U.S. government is kind of your last chance to stop what ICANN is doing. And so now the U.S. government is saying we don't want to do this anymore. Someone else should be that last stop. So that's the accountability. How do you make sure ICANN is accountable to the community? Because now you can't rely on the U.S. government, for example, to make sure they don't go rogue and do something that is not good for the internet. So that's a separate process. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on all this. The GAC is consulting with ICANN about how this transition should happen. So they're involved. I'm just going to speed through this stuff. The GNSO, which is for the generic TLDs. These are the main policies that they're working on today. So we talked about translation and transliteration of Who is data. What that means is, you're all familiar with Who is, right? It's a public database that tells you who owns a domain name. In new TLDs, it's required to be thick. And what thick means is that it contains at least 4 contacts about who manages that domain name. A lot of CCTLDs are not thick, right? They're thin. All they show is, here's the domain name, here's when it was registered, here are the name servers. You don't know anything else about who runs that, who's the registrant, admin, tech. And there are 2 or 3 GTLDs that are also thin. Most notably, CommonNet are still thin. .jobs is still thin. All those are going to thick, right? They're going to contain all the data that you see in a thick Who is. And so the real question is, once those go thick, they're all in English right now. So if someone puts in a non-Latin character, Arabic or Chinese or what have you, it simply doesn't display right in the Who is. So the question is, do we just force everyone to stick with English, or is there a way to translate those or display those in the native language? Is that an accurate description? Right? So we're not even sure this is possible, but there's a group of people trying to figure out if it's a good idea and how it might be done. Privacy and proxy services. This is the debate between individuals that deserve to be private, especially if they're talking about if it's a free speech issue. It might be somebody might not be welcome in there where they happen to live, versus typically intellectual property people that want to be able to, and law enforcement people that want to be able to track down who owns a domain name in case they're a bad actor. I talked about policy and implementation, which I'm on, which talks about the demarcation between here's a policy, here's the implementation, and was it actually implemented true to the policy, or did it take a right-hand turn somewhere? The GAC is involved in trying to protect a bunch of names in these new TLDs, one of them being IGOs or NGOs acronyms. So for example, the Red Cross and the Olympics are 2 names that are protected across all the new TLDs. No one can register redcross.shoes, even though that's a brand name in the US for shoes, because they want to preserve that international government organization just for that IGO. The Olympics is the same way. There's a sporting goods store in my hometown called Olympics, but they can't get a TLD or a second level name for that matches the Olympics. And in fact, there's probably several hundred acronyms that are international global organizations that that are trying to protect their acronyms in these new TLDs. And you know, there's a bunch of projects here. We're not going to spend any time on this. I just want to spin through this real fast. We talked about, you know, here's all the things about transliteration. Go ahead.
No, just if I may add, just another interesting topic, I think it's related to the issues that are being discussed also, is the release of the two letter labels
Right.
at the second level of the.
That's a good point. So when these new TLDs came out, they said, in deference to the CCTLDs, let's reserve all two-letter domain names. So no one get .eg.bank, for example, right? And so that's kind of been the standing policy. But what's happened is gradually there's a process where a TLD registry can go back to ICANN and ask for that policy to be changed. So .biz, for example, which came out in 2001, initially had all two-letter, two-character domain names reserved, right? Didn't matter if they were an existing CCTLD or not. So they went to ICANN and said, we want to remove this policy. We think anyone should be able to get a two-character domain name. We have companies like GE, American Airlines, or AA. So I actually applied for one of these. I have TM.biz. TM happens to be the country code of Turkmenistan. It also happens to be an abbreviation for trademarks. So I have TM.biz for a trademark service that I run. And so I was allowed to grab that two-character domain name under .biz. So that policy now exists for these new TLDs. And it's, again, you have a registry, if they want to allocate these for public use, has to get permission from ICANN. It's called an RCEP process. They apply for it, it goes out for public comment, and then if no one really opposes it, then they get released. So currently, as I understand it, the policy is that you're allowed to get number, meaning 55 dot whatever. You're allowed to get number letter, like 5A, or reverse A5. But they're still reserving letter, so EG dot whatever, right? But a lot of the new TLDs are starting to get the permission to allocate those.
Well, part of the thing is that the volume of requests going through this process got a bit crazy. So the ICANN board and others said, look, this is nuts. This restriction is nuts. And then the GAC came back with something which was incredibly unhelpful, saying that, yes, we're okay with this idea, but some members may wish to impose restrictions. So the Italian government has decided that nobody can have IT dot anything. Other governments have just gone, yeah, whatever, we don't care.
And they're being selective about which TLDs they care about.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all over the place.
So you can't get IT.pizza. They're saying, we don't want anyone to have IT.pizza. We don't care if they get IT.wine. Right? So they're picking, I think, which ones they care about to protect.
Yes, so since the GAC has been mentioned.
Oh, the GAC is always going to be mentioned, but please.
So I think, yeah, basically we have like 4 categories of views, if I may. One is that some governments, they don't really care to be notified. They are happy with their 2-letter code to be used at the second level. A few others said that as far as this is a brand, then we're fine. Anything that's not a brand, we would like to be notified. And the conservative third view is no, it's the country code and we need to be notified before anything is being delegated. And finally, there are governments that are not really members of the GAC, so, and those we cannot speak on their behalf, so those are.
Okay.
I thought my understanding was your second to the last comment that the countries have to be consulted before they can redelegate those 2-letter.
Yeah, the board reached out to the GAC to see if governments, they don't mind their two-letter country codes being delegated as at the second level of the new TLD.
So they will have to consult those countries first before they.
Yes, if the country chooses so, they will have to consult first. But a few governments said we're fine, just go ahead and delegate the two-letter code at the second level. We don't need to be notified. Because again, like it was mentioned, the requests are really increasing.
So the number of requests, if you take what we call portfolio applicants for new TLDs, like Donuts. Donuts applied for 307 or something TLDs. They aren't going to get all of them, but let's just say they've got 200 TLDs. So they're going to have to submit 200 separate requests for the release of 2-character domains, which means that the rest of us have to read 200 requests and submit comments on 200 requests. I can staff have to process 200 requests. I mean, the entire thing.
It means that each government has to respond to 200 requests.
Yeah, the entire thing, it doesn't scale. It's I don't know, it's one of those stupid things. I mean, personally, they should never have put it into the bloody guidebook as a restriction. Because if you think about it consistently, there is no restriction in .com. It's like AA.com, BA.com, IE.com, DE.com. All of these exist. And has the world come to an end? No. You know, there's no problem. There's a lot of protections in new TLDs that are...
They're protective, right? They are. I mean, the only reason this exists is because CCTLDs are worried about losing customers, and that's a legitimate concern. The question is whether or not we should do anything about it, or if we should force you to compete, right? And
I'd be
improve your policies or your pricing or something else. So it's kind of a it's no different than all the legacy GTLDs want protection too.
Well, they won't say it.
Well, they put up barriers about you must have these extra security thresholds to make it harder, to make it expensive to run a new GLD.
Don't you think that it's a little bit messy?
It's what?
It's a little bit messy. It's
very messy.
It's a total mess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Total mess. And that's the polite way of describing it. Ask me when I'm not standing in front of a group of people, I will give you a shorter answer. The first word is cluster.
Yeah, no, it's very chaotic, no question about it. And so it means that as a CCTLD, they can't be stagnant. They can't, if they want to compete, which they do, they have to examine their policies, examine their pricing, and say, are we really serving our marketplace? Because if we don't, we're going to get competition from these new GLDs, and they will take users away from us.
So Tom the other week gave a presentation in Jordan about the positioning thing, which is quite an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, other people have given other presentations. But if you look at the TLDs that are coming, there's some that are like industry specific. So, for example, we're a hosting company, so we have blackknight.host. We also have blackknight.hosting because it was stupid not to have it. The way I look at it is when I'm talking to people, I say, look, your average business is going to have maybe one domain. They're not going to have 50. So are they going to choose to register the local CCTLD, or are they going to go with the generic domain? If the local CCTLD has a lot of restrictions, you're going to go to the easier way, which is probably going to be the GTLD. And I'm speaking from a country where our CCTLD has the most arcane, illogical rules imaginable.
So you have got Africa coming out. So a lot of business in your country might decide they want to market to the entire continent, not just one market. And so they want to brand themselves as a continental business, not just a country business. So it's all about branding and positioning for your end users and whether or not your brand suits their needs or not. I'm going to fly through some of the stuff, because I don't want to spend too much time on the policy stuff. We beat a lot of this stuff to death. Proxy services we've talked about.
That's a big one, it's a very contentious one.
Yeah, especially because the EU has very strict privacy rules.
Well, this is one of the things. One of the problems with ICANN is it's set up as a US entity. So all the contracts are written from a US perspective. So when it comes to privacy, it's how diplomatic do I have to be?
Not whatsoever.
ICANN plus privacy equals disaster. They don't do privacy very well. So at the moment, in most European countries, and not just in Europe, I don't know what it's like in this region, but in European countries, you have a right to privacy. This is a right. It's not an extra. It's not something that you have to go and ask for. You're entitled to it. And in some countries in Europe, the rules are very, very, very strict. So publishing people's contact details to the world, that's a problem. So there's a big business in providing proxy and privacy services. In Europe, it's important for individuals to be able to register domain names and not publish all their details. There's freedom of speech issues around it globally.
Right. So,
I mean, there's a lot of different things there. The problem, of course, is intellectual property rights people want to have access to the data, and law enforcement wants to have access to the data.
so you have some of the new TLDs where they have prohibited privacy and proxy, not allowed. So .bank is one of them. They're not allowed to have privacy or proxy. There's .bank TLD.
Which makes sense.
Others have required privacy policies. Required it. So .wed, .gay are making it mandatory to have privacy and proxy. So the policy varies by TLD. So this working group's talking about how to basically regulate who can get privacy and proxy policies. They've already started to add some new fields in the who is. One of them is an abuse contact. It was not rolled out very well. And so as a result, all registrars who list an abuse contact in the who is are getting spammed. Like people who want to buy domain names, for example. So there's some hiccups with some of the initial features that have been added.
This is an interesting one for any of you who are, interested in privacy, freedom of speech. This proxy privacy thing is quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's open for public comment very soon, in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
So again, we're going to move on pretty fast through these. I've talked about intergovernment organizations, whatnot, you reserve, Red Cross, Olympics. Transfer policies within GTLDs, you're supposed to have freedom of choosing what registrar you work with. You should be able to leave them anytime you want, move to another one. So there's all kinds of policies related to that.
It's also where the most, ICANN's compliance department gets complaints from people about things to do with registrars and registries, and transfers are where most of the complaints come from.
At the cost, the transfer, is it free?
Yes and no. There's no extra cost normally for a transfer. The transfer is the cost of a 1-year registration, and it adds a year to the registration period normally.
Most of them require you to renew it for another year to
Yeah.
do the transfer.
There's no extra cost. It's not like you pay a fee for the transfer plus, the renewal or whatever.
The money taken upfront then.
Unless the registrar provides credit terms to the registrants, yeah, it's upfront. I mean, my company does not offer credit terms for anything, unless you're a very, very, very big company. And even then I would question it. Tom's company, because of his business model, he will offer credit terms. But like, you want to buy a domain name from us, you pay us. Saying to me that the check is in the post, we'll go, thank you, we will register the domain when we receive it.
When I say transfer this domain name to Thomas,
Well, he might give you credit terms, I won't. He's nice that way.
Right, so
I'm evil. Thing is, I charge less than he does.
So I have, a lot of the customers I have are governments. They don't want to pay by credit card, right? They only pay by, they pay by check, if they're able to in US dollars, because I don't want to see a check in another currency. So if they can't give me a check in US dollars, I'll take a bank wire. So I'm very flexible in terms of how people can pay. The one issue that the whole policy that really concerns CCTLDs is this IATA transition. And so, you know, because that involves delegation and redelegation. There was a big blow up now within the CCNSO community is whether or not there should be an appeal mechanism related to a redelegation, and whether or not that should be tied to this IATA transition. And so there's I don't know if there's a list or a mailing list of all the CCTLD managers. They're all discussing this appeal mechanism as we speak about whether that should be part of this. We talked about accountability, how it's managed. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. All this is available. You can attend webinars if you're interested to learn about some of these policies. There's just a lot going on. This is supposed to be the consensus building process with registries, registrars, governments, trademark attorneys, all coming together to try to come up with a policy on how this is the government of the internet, how to run the internet. So I'm going to I don't think there's anything here that we haven't already discussed on. The GAC, we talked quite a bit about what they're involved in. It's interesting, the GAC is, I think, you know, we talked about all this consensus building and multi-stakeholder process. The one group that does not necessarily participate in the formation of a policy is the GAC, right? So the way it's structured today, which I think is going to change, it has to change, is the GAC waits until this consensus gets built among all the different communities and gets sent up to the ICANN board for approval, and then the GAC weighs in saying, we want to change something. Well, the problem with that obviously is we have a consensus already. You're coming in too late. Yeah. So what has to be fixed there is the GAC has to start to participate in some of these working groups.
Well, they are to a certain degree.
And they're getting better, but that's historically been the problem, is that they've come in too late. They've come in at the implementation phase, where the policy's already done, and they want to change the policy. And so that's where there's a lot of back and forth between the GAC and board, because ICANN's stuck in between saying, well, we've got to auto the policy-making process. That's a consensus. Why didn't this come up then? It's because the structure of ICANN just isn't quite right. So I think we're evolving towards a better process.
Yes, and there is currently a GAC GNSO consultation group that's working specifically on GAC early engagement in GNSO PDP. So
And there's a GNSO liaison to the GAC as well.
this is one of the.
Yeah, you've got Mason Cole here. He used to be the chair of the
Yeah, there's a lot of liaisons, and that should be a red flag saying it's there to fix something that's broken.
Yeah.
Right? We have to have a liaison to have these people communicate early on in the process.
I mean, the other thing as well to bear in mind, for a lot of the GAC members, ICANN is just part of a bigger portfolio.
Sure.
It's not their job.
Well, it's the same thing with you and me. ICANN is just part of our job too. We've got a business to run.
Oh, okay.
This is
I
a
work for
distraction.
ICANN full-time practically at this stage.
Yeah. Right. All right, I'm going to switch gears for you. I think we've had enough policy. So what I want to do real quick is backpedal a little bit and just make sure everyone understands a little bit of the technology of DNS. I know most of you, I think, already get this. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, we say root and domain name and things like that. So what I'm giving you today is actually, think of it as it's a sales pitch from one of the DNS providers that exist in the industry today called Day, right? And we'll hear more from another DNS vendor. So we've heard about registries and registrars. There's also, and some of those provide DNS as part of their service, but the industry tends to be horizontal in the sense that you can find a provider for every service you can imagine. So they're not always vertically integrated, whereas they do all the services. So when we talk later about bootstrapping a business, if you want to start a business, there's probably a dozen different vendors that you can engage to run your business. So Dyn is one of them. I like this because it's a good educational component, but at the end they do give a sales pitch. So we talk about whether or not you like their sales pitch. But keep in mind, it's not purely educational. So DNS, I think we've talked about this. It's basically an easier way to represent an IP address. We talked about IPv4, which basically means 4 numbers with dots in between them, right? That's IPv6. There's 6 numbers with dots between them. So domain name is just a real simple way to remember what that longer IP address is. And again, I'm just obviously keeping this at a high level just to make sure we're all on the same page. So today, you need to go, if you want to buy a GTLD, you have to go to an ICANN registrar. And so that industry was created when they decided to bring competition to network solutions. I refer to it as an artificial market layer. It's purely artificial. And in fact, it's going away with some of these new GTLDs. They now allow, with some of the newer TLDs, something called vertical integration, which means they can be their own registrar again, just like the old days, just like many of the CCTLDs. So they go through a process where they say, I don't want to let GoDaddy sell my names. I want to do it myself, or I want to pick and circuit and do it, and that's it. So it's the new GTLDs are now basically moving away from this model where all registrars were allowed to sell their product. Okay, so it's more deregulation for the marketplace. So by default, every registrar is allowed to sell new TLD unless they've been granted an exemption. Right? So .realtor, for example, is one of those. I'm the only reseller for .realtor. Black Knight, you can't go to Black Knight and buy .realtor. You have to come to my registrar called Nameshare. So they've been given an exclusive license from the registry to manage .realtor.
But this is bad for the end user. This is bad for me. You know, if you charge me $10,000, what can I do?
It's a great point whether or not it's bad. So .realtor, for example, is restricted. You have to be a member of the association, right? So you can't get a .realtor anyway. And in fact, the way we've structured it in .realtor is I'm just a technology provider, right? If you go to buy a .realtor domain name, you don't know that I'm your registrar because I have an API, right? They built their own front end that's customized for their members. So it's a perfect user experience. It's good for their users. They're not confused about, oh, you want a .realtor? Why don't you get a .info too? Right? They don't offer any other TLDs. They bundle in email and web hosting as part of the process. So it's an ideal end user experience. Right? But you're right in the sense that in other cases it might not be good if you don't have freedom of choice. And that happens, for example, .bank. .bank requires DNSSEC, if you're familiar. So it requires these extra security requirements. It requires the name service to be based on a .bank domain name. It requires email security like DMARC. Well, Go Network Solutions, which is one of the biggest registrars in the U.S., most banks in the U.S. are using Network Solutions because they're the oldest, right? They started with them and they haven't left. Well, guess what? Network Solutions doesn't support .bank, right? In fact, there are only 10 registrars supporting .bank today. And most of them are guys like me who weren't around 15 years ago. So if you're a major bank in the US, you have to pick another registrar than your .com domain name. I know that sucks, right? Not for me, because I have to support .bank. But it's not good if you're with a registrar that won't support bank. You want a .bank domain name.
And if there are any disputes or something I can go to, I can the same way with .com.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the UDRP it's called, you have a trademark dispute, that's universal across all of these TLDs. The transfer policy is universal across all these new TLDs, except, you have to find, so transfer is limited, right? You only can transfer it to another registrar that supports that TLD. Again, .bank only has 10 of them. I'm also a registrar for .pharmacy. There's only like 4 of us.
For now.
For now. Well, yeah, so there's
So
4.
we will opt for .pharmacy.
Okay, well, take your time. It's already lunch. Wait a year. So .pharmacy, for example, is you have to get validated that you're a pharmacy that costs $2,000. And then you come to us and we charge you another $1,200 a year for .pharmacy. And you have to also support this extra token that they issue to prove you're a pharmacy. So there's a lot of extra work for registrars. We're only one of 4 that have agreed to do it. And so again, if you want to transfer a name, you can, but only amongst the 4 of us. So that's just the way the market's working today. But
I mean, it is an interesting thing around choice and everything else. I mean, the reality is for so many TLDs, not all registrars are going to carry all TLDs. And then you're going to have, specific ones like .pharmacy and .bank that, okay, we will carry .pharmacy eventually, but I'm in no hurry. Not for the, I mean, he's happy that I'm in no hurry. Because it means, for now, there's only 4 companies he has to worry about.
Because the inertia is huge. That's why a lot of banks are still with network solutions, because they just don't change their registrar. Whoever they go with first, they stay with year after year after year. Even if they're paying 5 times what they could get somewhere else, it's just easier to stay where you are, right? So so he can come on board a year from now. He'll get very few of my customers because they'll never leave me. That's part of the business.
Or so he says with confidence. But that's okay. This is what competition is all about. I mean, the reality is for the more popular TLDs, the ones that most people are going to register, there is competition. So for example, if you want to register a .website domain, you can probably choose between 100 registrars. If you want to register a .com, pretty much every registrar offers it. You want to register .pharmacy, well, first off, you're going to have to meet these particular criteria, so the competition is going to be very different.
I mean, GoDaddy, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, controls 50% of the market today. 50%. They weren't around when I canned lunch. They weren't one of the original 7, right? They came along a few years later, but they had a different business model. A lot of their new business came from the legacy registrars like Network Solutions. So they came up with a value proposition that motivated people to transfer.
Can you help that with the restrictions that you are using to register this pharmacy and all the rules and the high price for it? Doesn't that affect on the number of sales for this domain?
Huge.
Yeah, it's a very, very few numbers.
So, yeah, and so .pharmacy is a good example. They're not trying to sell names. Their mission is a little different. It's not a for-profit business. They're trying to do something else, which is to regulate pharmaceuticals on the internet, right? So in the U.S., for example, drugs are very expensive. But if you go to a website and buy them in Canada, you get them for 10% of the cost, right? Under U.S. law, that's illegal. If I do that, I'm breaking the law in the U.S. So the group behind .pharmacy is trying to shut that down and regulate that. So they have a different mission. It's not a domain name based buying mission. All right? So we've talked a lot about domain names, or the DNS system. Again, it's just this directory like a phone book. This is how people navigate when they type in your name on a browser, how you can find your website. I think you all know this. I want to make sure there's no, there's something called a fully qualified domain name. So for Encirca, it'd be www.encirca.com. So if you're familiar with SSL certs, right, for secure encrypted data, you typically get it on a fully qualified domain name. Okay? So I think we've already talked about this. There's about 300 plus million domain names today. About half of those are still in .com. So .com is very much the monopoly provider in the marketplace. We talked about the root. So there are 13 root servers. So and then there's a zone file for each TLD. So if you're running a ccTLD, you have your own zone file. So anyone looking for a .eg first goes to the root, and then they go to the country code or gTLD zone file, right? Then from there they'll find whoever runs that is the host of that particular domain. Is everyone familiar with this? Is this kind of
It's okay.
okay? So DNSSEC, under the new agreement that registrars have with ICANN, called the 2013 RAA, so it took effect just over a year ago. We are required to support DNSSEC. We're also required to support IPv6 addresses. It doesn't mean we have to do it for free, right? So DNSSEC, for example, is required for .bank. If you want to activate your .bank domain name to get it resolved, it has to be DNSSEC enabled. So on top of the $1,000 I'm charging for a .bank domain name, I'm also going to charge extra to enable DNSSEC on that name. Are you active at all in DNSSEC?
No.
Yeah. So you're required to support it, and the way you do that is you say, yeah, we support it for $5,000 or $10,000, right?
Well, no, I mean, the reality with us is, in the last 10 years, I think we've received 4 requests for DNSSEC. 4. It was like, yeah, whatever. Not a huge demand. We will support it, but essentially not on our own name servers. We'll put in the data you need. IPv6, not a problem. Yeah, we do that. You want IPv6? No problem. Have IPv6.
Have at it. So there's a bunch of DNS records that you're probably familiar with, from A records to MX records, CNAME records, the DNSSEC records, and so forth. So these are, you're all familiar with the different DNS records. So if you want to get an email, for example, you have to set up your MX records, right? You set up your website typically with an A record. If you want to do a third level name or subdomain, you use CNAME records. So I'm just going to spin through this, make sure there's nothing. So someone asked a question earlier about fast flux. Who is that? Yeah. So do you know anything about fast flux?
Of course.
You want to. So you're wrestling with that with your ccTLD?
Yeah, with my system.
What's the ICANN rule nowadays with fast flux? Do they have anything?
I think there was something they did look into it a lot. I mean, essentially the fast
So
flux.
why don't you explain the problem?
Right. Well, the problem. Now, somebody can correct me if I missed part of this, but essentially what was happening was that people, or bad actors, as we like to call them, as opposed to good actors, they were changing the name servers on domains very, very often. Now, if you take a normal business, you register as a domain name, you set up name servers, you might change the name servers once a year, or every 2 years, or 3 years, or maybe never. I mean, they don't change that often. They're fairly stable. There's nothing wrong with changing your name servers, but these people, what they're doing is they're changing the name servers several times per day.
And so why would they do this? So, for example, if I was going to send out spam, right, unsolicited email to 2 million addresses, and I send out a burst of email to these 2 million addresses, there are a lot of monitoring services that will detect where that's coming from and blacklist, that IP address, and blacklist those name servers. And so they try to get around some of that activity by
switching.
sending it off and then switching their name servers really fast and sending out.
We discovered a couple of years ago one of those rare times when I gave something away for free. So, moral of the story, don't give stuff away for free. One of our beloved clients was running a website offering unauthorized video streams of football matches. And they kept hopping from one hosting provider to another, and every time they changed hosting provider, they have to change name servers because, well, a lot of the hosting providers, it's an all-in deal. So they were changing hosting provider every 2 days because they were being shut down wherever they went. But the fast fuck stuff, I mean, it was a security issue, really. Now, I'm not 100% sure what came out of that in the end. I think the general idea is, if you see name servers changing all the time, then okay, there might be a problem.
So I don't know if some of the registries are being proactive in monitoring that kind of stuff, but there's no prohibition against it.
So there's legitimate reasons why you would change your name servers, and you might need to change them regularly for legitimate reasons. It's just unlikely.
Does that answer your question? All right. So we've already talked about IPv6, IPv4, connect records, anti-spam. Again, this is, for example, .bank is requiring DMARC records. So you either can use DKIM or SDF. It's just a way to make sure that when email is being received by a mail server, it's authoritative and being sent by whoever it purports to be from. So .bank is one of the TLDs requiring those types of records. No one else I'm aware of is requiring it yet. And then we get into some of the sales pitch from Di in terms of what they're doing and how their services are different. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The thing about DNS, a DNS provider, is what you're paying them for. The reason you hire them on is their ability to distribute your traffic worldwide. So that resolution is good from any part of the world, but also to be able to be effective against denial of service attacks. Right. So this is one of the critical bottlenecks on any website is your DNS provider. And if someone does a distributed denial of service attack and shuts them down, that affects your website and all your customers' websites. So you clearly want to make sure you're using someone who is distributed so they don't have a single point of failure, either from DDoS or a tsunami hitting a data center or losing power or what have you. What are you doing about DDoS for your business?
We have lots of funky things in routers and switches. We do all sorts of tagging and stuff. It's okay, you don't run data centers, you don't have to worry about
I
it.
said you have to deploy DNSSEC as soon as possible.
You have to do what, sorry?
To deploy DNSSEC as soon as possible.
Oh yes, of course, because DNSSEC is going to solve all the world's problems.
Yes.
I mean, the DDoS stuff, I mean, for us as a company, DDoS is a problem, it is a risk, but we run our own infrastructure, so we're able to mitigate it on our own network and then work with the upstream providers. But if you're for smaller companies, it is a huge problem. Gizmo, which is a very popular resource for open source code, I think they've been under DDoS attack for 3 days. That essentially means that GitHub is essentially offline. Now, we've been hit with several gigabits of DDoS attacks in the past, and It's painful. It's really, really painful. You know, your website disappears.
I just want to take a quick status check. How many of you can access the internet right now, the next 5 minutes? Or how many can't? Is there anyone not have a laptop or something with them? Okay. A few of us? So the reason I asked is I wanted to, you know, we're kind of done with the policy stuff. I wanted to start getting into the business stuff. I also wanted to introduce you to this online business mentoring service that I want you all to sign up for. So I'll do it now to show you what it looks like. And maybe you can think about how you might sign up for this as well. But the idea of a business mentoring service is that you create a profile on this service, talking about who you are and the kind of help or networking you want to do. So if you want to network with someone who knows DNS stack or who understands fast flux, for example, or can help you with marketing a TLD, or do legal work with a TLD, you can say that in your profile. And what we'll do after this class next week is we will help match you up with experts in the industry who can help you with your technical or legal or what have you, right? So I'm gonna switch gears for a second and show you what that mentoring service looks like before we get into this business stuff, all right? So the service is called Micro Mentor. So it's micromentor.org. And I'll just log into my account and show you what you do on this service. Got my little password reminder. I can't remember anything. All right. So this is my account on Micro Mentor. And so there's a group here called Domain Name Industry that I've created.
It's not fine. We've got the best business plan.
Oh, sorry.
You could have let them go for another 5 months, would be 510.
Yeah. So you're not seeing my browser.
No.
So the way this mentoring service works, let's say I want to find a mentor. So I have this group called Domain Name Industry. You go to micromentor.org, which is right here, and you create an account. You join the domain name industry. And this is where we're going to create a profile. So if I want to find a mentor, or I do a few things here. I can create a profile, or I can simply ask a question. And so there are different types of relationships you can have with a mentoring service. You can say, hey, can anyone tell me more about DNSSEC? And you just pose that question within this group. And anyone who's knowledgeable about DNSSEC can just respond to your answer online, right? So it's like one-off type of questions you might have. But maybe you'd like to develop a more long-term relationship with someone who you can consult with on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. So that's where you say, look, I'm looking for a mentor who I can talk to once a month about some legal issues or marketing issues, what have you. And so that's where you get someone to volunteer their time basically for an hour a week or an hour a month. and they become your mentors who provide their expertise. And so what I'd like to see if you guys could do is just take a few minutes and go to micromentor.org and create an account there. And we'll spend some more time on this next week. Or you could maybe make time during lunch to go through here and sign up at micromentor.org. All it asks you for is basic information. You indicate if you're looking for a mentor or want to be a mentor, and you sign up for that account. And then we can, as I say, if you sign up and create a profile, I'll after this class next week or the next few weeks, I'll find mentors for you. They'll be from existing CCTLD registry, GTLD registry. They could be a registrar, they could be a trademark lawyer, somewhere else in the world. They could be a consultant, a business strategic consultant, marketing consultant. So the idea is that we have a resource you can use. So if you have a business issue 3 or 6 months from now, you have a way to get those questions answered. All right. So micromentor.org. Maybe tonight you take some time to create a profile, and we can talk more about this later in the week. Any questions about that? All right. So we have just about a half hour before we break for lunch. And so I wanted to switch gears. I think we're done with the policy stuff for a while. And this is kind of leading into the topic for this afternoon, which is developing a business plan. So this is actually just a one-pager. We're going to go into more details about a business plan. Has anyone written a business plan before? Do we have any MBAs?
MBA students.
You're an MBA student? Fantastic. So have you written a business plan?
Yes, but I didn't take the marketing course yet.
Okay.
It was the computer management course.
All right. Anyone else take business classes? Okay. So a business plan, is a good idea if you're starting a business, or if you're just not even starting a business, but if you have an existing one, maybe launch your new service or new product, you typically would make a business case for it. It's something which is a plan, right? You might deviate from it fairly quickly. They call it a pivot. It's a polite way of saying you're throwing away your business plan, you're starting over. They call it a pivot in the U.S. And it's not a matter of if, but when you're going to do it. And so the sooner you find out your business plan is wrong, the better. And you try to fix it. You also would have to write a business plan if you wanted to raise money from investors. So they need to explain what your business plan is, how you're going to be different in the marketplace in terms of your value add, your unique selling proposition, how much money you need just to invest in the business to get it started, what your revenues are going to look like, where they're going to come from, and so forth. So this is just a high-level outline of a formal business plan, where you have the executive summary. So again, you're trying to appeal to investors. So you have an executive summary, and they decide if they want to keep reading it or not. You just describe the company's vision and goals, what kind of products and services are included in your plan, your marketing plan, and we're going to talk in detail about what is a marketing plan. And there's something called the 4 Ps of marketing that we'll talk about, that every marketing plan should talk about. Right? You should talk about your product, you should talk about your pricing, your business model, promotion. The last one is placement. Placement, very good. So, and sometimes there's more Ps. I like the word position, right?
People.
I'm sorry?
And people.
And people, exactly. In fact, the new academic textbooks have 9 Ps of marketing, or what have you, right? But I'm an old school guy. I go with the 4. We can throw the 5th one in. And so we're going to talk a lot about that this week. I think it's from a business perspective. If you're in a CCTLD, for example, you need to have an idea of the 4 Ps as well as the position, because you are kind of in competition, maybe for the first time in your marketplace from these new TLDs. And so you need to be able to articulate why your customers should stay with you rather than go through one of these new TLDs. The operational plan really talks about your staffing plan. Not only when do you start adding people, what kind of skill sets do you need, and you're making sure those have to keep pace with your revenue, or do they have to lead your revenue by a few months, these salespeople? What your management structure is, and finally the financial plan, which are the forecast that you have for revenue. And so we're going to get into a lot of, I have actual examples of registries, and so you see what their financial forecasts are for growing their market, and how both the revenue and expense side need to work together. All right? So I don't know if I'll be able to get through all this stuff before lunch, but we'll see how far we can get. So this is a very academic type of description of a business plan put together by a small business council in the U.S. And it's totally blank. There you go. Well, as I said earlier, you need to figure out who your audience is for this business plan, right? If you're inside an organization, then your audience obviously is whoever's going to decide the budget for the upcoming year, whether or not this is an investment they want to make. And so a business plan for an internal organization might be slightly different than a business plan for if you're trying to raise money from investors. Or it might just be a business plan for yourself to be organized and prepared before you start off in a new venture. Sometimes we don't practice what we preach. I know when I started my business, I didn't do a business plan. I've written a few business plans in the past for various things I've done, raised some money, but I know sometimes I've just done things by accident, right? Without a lot of planning, and you make it up as you go along. It's a good idea probably to, at least once a year, to think about your business plan. You know, think about whether or not you're addressing the right markets, and your pricing looks good, and your promotion looks good. But it's not something, you know, most of the time reality interferes, and you just need to manage your business. So as I mentioned, this is for yourself, and it's for others, so you need to understand who your audience is. You know, we talked about this morning doing an elevator pitch. So the question is, can you take a 50-page business plan and summarize it in 60 seconds, right? And that's a challenge for a lot of people, because sometimes that's all the time you have to grab someone's attention. And if you can't interest them in 60 seconds, then they won't bother reading any document you put in front of them. So we've already talked about who the audience is. The other good place to see a business plan is when financial filing. So in the U.S., for example, one of the GoDaddy has just filed to go public in the U.S., to become a public company. And so they had to file some documents to show how much money they want to raise doing an initial public offering. And we'll look at it later, but when you read their financial filing documents, it actually reads like a business plan, because they're trying to convince people to buy their stock when they go public. In other words, they're trying to convince people to become investors in their business. So they've laid out their business plan in this financial filing. And so if you want to do some competitive intelligence, look at a company, a competitor of yours that's public, and look at their quarterly filings, and you pretty much can figure out what their strategy is going to be going forward.
The other thing with the public companies is that they have to divulge a lot of detail. So for me, for example, looking at the report for 2 cars, I can see, what their top managers are earning. Not down to the last cent and dollar, but you get a very good idea. But things as well like to do with cash flow. You can extrapolate that out then based on how big the business is. To give you an idea, you go, okay, maybe we're doing it right, maybe we're doing it wrong. I get my CFO to look at the public filings from these companies. When you talk to a bank in Ireland about running a domain registrar and hosting company, you might as well be talking Chinese to them. And no offense to Chinese people. But they don't understand it. So you have to try to get your CFO to understand it and get the CFO to try to train the bank to understand what you do. Because banks in Ireland understand tractors. If you go to the bank and you say you want €100,000 to buy some agricultural machinery, no problem. You want €100,000 to buy, I don't know, factory equipment, no problem. You want €20,000 to buy a couple of servers, big problem.
The other thing that's great is that you read in the financial filing are the incentive plans, so you can see what their bonus structure is and how they're going to, what metrics they might have to get their bonus, which typically is in the form of stock options. The other thing that's great in a financial filing, which we talk about, are risk factors. What could go wrong with this business, right? So you do a lot of, they identify, especially in a financial filing, everything that could possibly go wrong and whether or not they have to do something to mitigate that, right? So obviously competition is one risk factor. The competition could do something. So as a CCTLD, you have to think about your potential competition with new TLDs entering your market. You have to think about what happens if ICANN does something that changes and affects your ability to run your TLD. So all that should be really factored into your business plan. I've been talking about this elevator pitch. I want to keep talking about that. Basically, you should be able to articulate your vision and your strategy in those 60 seconds, and start with that, and then from there build out your business plan. So this again is reiterating that. Figure out your pitch. Here are the 3 important components to a successful company. Do you have the expertise required to sell your product or service? Most of you are technical, so you recognize that's a pretty critical requirement. In fact, perhaps your point of differentiation, how you're different from someone else, right? So as a business in Circa, I'm a technology provider. And so I offer myself up to registries that are looking for technology as opposed to a sales and marketing machine like GoDaddy, right? I don't do a lot of sales and marketing, I do technology. So that I recognize that's my differentiating factor. The ability to market one, I'm not a marketing person, as I said. If you want to sell a lot of product, go to a retail arm. If you want a technology solution for your end users, that's something I do. Clearly, one of the things I like to, I'm a small business, right? And so if you want to hire me, the question is, what happens if my team gets hit by a bus, right? And I use that analogy. And so I actually structure my proposals and my solutions in a way so that my clients are not impacted if our small business goes out of business, doesn't exist anymore. And so, for example, I can do that in ways such as, look, we put everything in cloud services. And so if something happens to us, it doesn't disrupt your business. It's continuity of what you're trying to do. And so it's very important to convey not just one person or a small group of people that might put this business at risk. And you have to convey that in your business plan as well. So we'll talk a lot about this. We'll have some real life examples for the rest of the week in terms of how different DNS businesses are marketing themselves and how they're developing not only their business plan, but their revenue plan, their marketing plan, their go-to-market plan. your business basically, your idea or your business should do at least 2 of 3 things, right? It can't do all 3. You either can do something more efficient, more effective, or better. Or another way to say it, you can do it cheaper, faster, or better. But you can't do all 3. But you can probably do 2 of the 3. So you got to decide if in order to be unique and have a unique selling proposition in your marketplace, you have to decide what do you do that's better, cheaper, or faster. Right? If you can't identify that you're doing one of those really good, then you really aren't, you're a commodity-based business. Right? So that's a big question with these new TLDs that are coming out, compared to .com, for example, or compared to .eg. How are they better, faster, or cheaper? A lot of them can't answer that question. .xyz, which right now is the top new TLD. What, 800,000 names?
.xyz, .sucks.
.xyz. Well, what do they do that's faster, better, cheaper? I can't figure it out. Right? So I'm not sure they're gonna.
Cheaper is what they are.
They're cheaper because they're giving the name away.
Yeah, they're cheaper, that's all.
They're cheaper. So they do cheap really good. But better, faster, there's no innovation there. So they have a challenge in making sure they have sustained power in the marketplace. Whereas .realtor, I think they do something better than .com.
I'd say the same for .host.
.host, exactly.
So for me, .host, it serves hosting companies. That's immediately self-explanatory.
Right. So it helps with branding.
Yeah.
.bank, what they're doing that's better is they've got security, right? DNS and DMARC for email. So they're doing that better than .com. So that's how these TLDs are starting to differentiate themselves. But Kaylee and I are on the .us CCTLD stakeholder or advisory council. And so we're trying to help them differentiate themselves as .us, as a .us brand, compared to all these other TLDs. So it's the same challenge any CCTLD has. You do something better. You help people brand themselves as something in your local market. .us is challenged because most US companies have .com, so they don't see .us really as a CCTLD. Talked about this. Some of the new TLDs are trying to make the world a better place. So .green, for example, .giving, .hiv. So they're all saying, buy our domain name and we'll help the world to be a better place. We'll improve the environment, or we'll make a donation to a charitable organization like .hiv. So that's part of the value proposition as well with some of these new TLDs. So the question is, are you doing something that's part of a bigger idea that people will buy into your vision? So another way to, whenever you look at a business, you want to understand how they're positioning themselves. You should look at their tagline. And I think that pretty much gives you a good idea of how they think they're different, what they think they're doing better, faster, cheaper than the rest of the market. The new trend, I call it a trend, among legacy TLDs, be it GTLDs like VeriSign, or even some of the CCTLDs, is they're all doing something more secure than the other guys, right? So there's a focus on right now the TLD world of registries claiming they're more secure than the alternative, right? And so that seems, we see that .com for VeriSign, we see it in a few other TLDs as well. So the question is, can you articulate really in 3 words what your business is going to be unique for? What's unique value proposition? So here are some examples. Walmart is trying to serve small, out-of-the-way rural towns. Dell Computer would sell the computer first and then build it. So it's this made-to-order type of concept that he invented. Starbucks wants to be the concept of the third place. It's not work, it's not home. Apple Computer was the computer for the rest of us, so they were trying to differentiate GE, where I used to work. Their goal was to either be number 1 or 2 in every market they serve. And they might have a profitable business, be it making locomotives and washing machines. If it wasn't 1 or 2, they would sell the business. Very strict criteria about what their mission was. Do you guys have your organizations, do you have slogans or goals like this? Anybody? ITI.
We have people from a lot of countries.
Excellent.
It's training institute mainly.
Yeah.
IT training institute.
So we develop people, people develop companies. Anyone else?
DEDIT is the fastest internet lead.
And are you the fastest internet leader? I'm hearing no from over here.
I can fix this problem.
Okay, so he'll be giving you all discounts. Special hubs to the course, get a discounted rate in your DSL.
Electronic gateway to the knowledge.
That's .eg.
Yeah. .eg is the umbrella of the Egyptian Universities Network, EUN.
Okay.
So Egyptian Universities Network has the electronic gateway to the knowledge.
To the knowledge.
Yes, and EUN has a lot of another services plus .eg. There's a lot of another services in addition.
Okay. So here's a question for both of you, all 3 of you. Do you think anyone else has the same idea that you have? Because what you're doing basically is trying to position yourself in the minds of your customers or your marketplace. Is here's how we stand out, right? Here's how we're different, right? So the question is, do you think this is different from what other people say? Does any other ISP?
No.
No one else says we're the fastest.
No.
Right?
Does anyone? No.
I'm going to show you another interesting position that I like, which is, everyone's familiar with .org, PIR, right? So .org is coming out with 2 ones, .ngo and ONG. So they have a very similar one to mission statement than you, I think. See if I can bring it up.
Your house is not displaying the order.
It's not displaying again? All right. What does display?
Looks like a wallpaper.
You know why? Because I normally have multiple displays back in my office, and so I think it keeps reverting to that. So .org, I wanted to see if I can. They have a. It's over here. I know you can't read this. Let me see if I can highlight their tagline. So they're trying to highlight their community. And I'll come back to this later, but it's very similar to yours in the sense that they want to help people communicate and grow their knowledge as well. Whereas if you go to VeriSign, it's all about security. So they're putting in all kinds of value-added services to fight distributed denial of service attacks. So they claim to be a global leader in domain names and internet security, right? So that's how they're going to try to differentiate themselves from these 1,000 new top-level domains that all want to compete with .com. They're saying we're secure. You're worried about phishing attacks, DDoS attacks, malware. We have tools that were added to protect that kind of domain name abuse. And in fact, we'll talk more later this week, talk about some specific new tools that are coming out to monitor for domain name abuse, which again is I think the next new area for registries to get involved. So we talked about some of these taglines, the business, what's the purpose of a business plan? Obviously describe how you're going to make money. What's great about the domain name industry, which you'll hear a lot about, is it's one of the best businesses to be in. And the reason for that is it doesn't require a lot of upfront investment. And it has a recurring revenue stream. I talked about this earlier. Once I sign up a pharmacy, it's very little work for me to keep them as a customer. And year after year, they keep renewing, right? It's like an insurance policy. People buy it and just keep renewing every year. So it's once you acquire a customer, in other words, as long as you can retain that customer, you have a nice business going forward. So the trick is, how do you acquire those customers? So what's your business model? GoDaddy's business model, they do advertising on TV, right? They sell a lot of ads on Google. My business model is I don't do, as I said earlier, I'm not good at sales and marketing. But what I do is I partner with organizations that already have a relationship with my target customer. So for example, I'm trying to sell .bank domain names. I'm not marketing to banks. What I do is I market to associations of banks, right? So for example, one of the biggest banking associations in the U.S., the Independent Community Banks of America, has 6,000 banks.
Okay, so the legal one, who wants to talk legal stuff?
I'm interested. I might be
Good.
the person.
Anyone else? Is it just, anyone else want legal stuff?
I need more.
Oh, no, big enough. Not big enough.
Maybe we skip that one.
All right.
Stuff in Egyptian
No, I know, it's we skip that one.
We'll skip it. We're going to talk a lot about legal issues. Maybe we'll do that another day.
And don't worry, we won't skip it completely, we'll do it maybe tomorrow. There's plenty of legal issues around domains, plenty.
All right. So we only have 2 topics so far.
So we have Egypt and we have
Alternatives.
alternatives.
Yeah.
So,
So what about, I'm sorry?
Not able to.
No.
Not able to.
What's the day?
not today.
Just today.
I just want to talk about marketing. But again, we'll be covering a lot of marketing topics. So I think later in the week we'll talk about marketing and legal issues. So maybe that'll be our focus during lunch as well. So today is more about local market issues, or alternatives to domain names.
Okay.
And does anyone want to talk about new TLDs and how it might threaten their current CCTLD? That's a good
Okay,
topic.
he wants to talk about everything.
Okay.
Oh, but yeah, well, I know, true. That's okay, we're two groups, it's fine.
Yep. So we'll cover that topic with a Facebook topic. How's that? So you've got a local Egyptian topic and how domain name marketplace there, and then you've got alternatives to domain names and threats to existing, which is part of the threat to existing CCTLD.
Okay, so the Egyptian one, is that all Egyptians over there?
You're in that group?
Well, I don't know, because I mean, that group is probably a bad idea, because they'll be...
No, they're all over the place.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. Just be nice to the foreigner.
And I'll be in the other group.
You got the easy one.
It's a fun group.
Okay.
All right, thanks, guys. So lunch is, so we should also talk about, so lunch is across the way, right?